Hey there, Clicks fans. This is Hunter with Dial H for Hero Clicks podcast, and today we're going to be doing a starter set review on both the Avengers and the X-Men starter sets for the Avengers vs. X-Men overarching Hero Clicks event, which is following up Fear Itself and before DC's big event next year. So we're going to be going over the contents of each starter set and whether we think you're getting enough value for the price that you're going to pay. Each of these will run you $40 per starter set. Each starter set comes with 6 figures and some other goodies that we're going to get into in a second. Each starter set includes the 6 figures, 6 poker chips which have the faces of individual characters from that faction, and then 2 custom dice that have the logos of either the X-Men or the Avengers. You also get a 2013 PAC, 2013 rulebook, a map, and barrier, smoke, special, light object, and heavy object tokens to play with. So typical starter set inclusion of everything, except the additional things that you're getting in this starter set that you don't get in most Click starter sets are the special dice. You'll notice the quality on the engravings on the Avengers dice are actually pretty good, as well as the poker chips. The weight is pretty heavy on them. They're heavy. The only thing about the dice is they do feel a little bit light. But overall, the engraving on it is very good. I'm actually pretty happy with how these turned out. When we initially saw these spoiled at Gen Con, we kind of didn't think they would turn out as good as they turned out, but the poker chips are nice, like I said. One thing to kind of note on the Avengers pack, or on the Avengers pack, Wolverine is a figure included, and so is Spider-Man, yet they are not featured on the poker chips. You have Red Hulk and you have Black Panther instead. There's kind of some rumors that maybe that's because the movie rights could not be obtained since they're not actually owned by Marvel and all that good stuff. But just a note, on the Avengers poker chips, there will be 2 that do not actually match the figures. On the X-Men, they're exactly match the figure. Sculpting on the pieces is overall pretty average for most of the recent sets of HeroClix that we've seen, like Invincible Iron Man and Teen Titans and Wolverine. Some highlights from the sets include Iron Man is one of the better ones, but I would say the top 4, the ones that kind of are overall better than your average sculpt. Out of the Avengers pack, you have Thor, Spider-Man, and Scarlet Witch, and the best one out of the X-Men is actually Magic, in my opinion. Overall, like I said, sculpting is a little bit better than usual on most of these, average at worst. None of them have any kind of derpy looking faces like every now and then you'll get from a HeroClix figure. They did a pretty good job overall. You will notice that these are actually SwitchClix figures. Another thing to note is that I think pretty much every one of these figures, yeah, it looks like every single one of the figures has 2 different point options on their dial. So that adds some playability to these pieces. The fact that they're easier to fit onto different point size teams. And it also kind of shows you that these pieces are going to be part of a team base. Now that's something that's going to play a big role in my determination of whether these starter sets are worth your money. $40 is a pretty steep price tag, even with the inclusion of the dice and the poker chips. However, if you play in your venue's Avengers vs. X-Men event, you have the chance throughout those 4 months to get 2 LEs for each faction. There's 2 LEs that you'll get if you play Avengers. There's 2 LEs that you'll get, different ones that you'll get if you play X-Men. The X-Men will get Danger and Hope. The Avengers will get Professor Xavier and Black Panther. But like I said, you can only acquire those through playing in your venue. Now those pieces that I just mentioned are also SwitchClix, and on month 4 of Avengers vs. X-Men, for participating, you will get the team base that goes with the starter set that you purchased. For each starter set you purchase, you're supposed to get a team base. So with the inclusion of the team base along with these figures and the extra stuff that you're getting that you don't typically get in a Avengers vs. X-Men starter set,
you are getting plenty of value. $40 is a steep price tag. However, I feel like with the inclusion of six figures, the standard stuff that you always get, plus the poker chips and the dice, not to mention the fact that these figures are great figures. The only piece out of each of these Avengers and X-Men added together, the only piece that I personally feel is not that great of a dial is Wolverine. However, his saving grace is that he has 3-point options. So, and he's not horrible. He's just kind of one of the weaker ones, but there are some exceptional pieces in here. I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. Cyclops in particular is very good on the X-Men side. Namor is very good as well. There's not really a bad piece. On the Avengers side, Scarlet Witch is actually a potential game changer for the metagame, with the ability to take away the opposing team's team abilities. Thor is actually really good as well. He's 200 points, has a penetrating energy explosion from like 8 range, 2 bolts. The Cap has a 200 point option, which is a rare thing for a Cap, and he's actually a very good piece as well. Like I said, though, all of these pieces are pretty good. So considering that all of these dials are very good, and that you have the poker chips and the dice, which are hard to come by these days. I mean, custom dice. This is the first time that WizKids has actually packaged something like this in with the packaging. I think all of this added together makes the $40 worth what you're paying. Now, if you are not participating in Avengers vs. X-Men, if you are just buying this starter set at your local venue and don't plan on getting the additional 2 pieces and the team base, then the answer to that question becomes a little more gray. Personally, I think it's probably still worth the money. But if you're not a huge Avengers or a huge X-Men fan, then you may not think it's worth the money if you're not also getting the team base that corresponds with them. One thing I do want to note about the team base that's very cool about it, unfortunately I can't show it to you right now, of course, because you don't receive the kits for it until month 4. But one cool thing about it is that there are plenty of open slots, and there are numbers on the asset dial instead of faces. So whenever you spin the asset dial, it doesn't matter who you placed, whether you placed these guys or you placed your LEs that you get from playing AVX on it. You just go by the power that pops up corresponding to the number. So that gives you plenty of options. It's actually a really smart way that they did it, and it'll work out very nicely. So that's one really intelligent thing that WizKids did when they designed those team bases. Now real quick, I'm going to show you guys the maps. The maps are actually different. The Avengers pack map is different than the X-Men map, so I want to open those up, give you guys a look at those. On the Avengers side, we have the Avengers Tower. It is all enclosed indoors. You have the different pillars there you see in the middle, and you have elevated areas on each corner of the map, as well as in the center. So even though there's so many elevated areas, you would think it would be easy to draw lines of fire to each other. However, remember, since this is indoors, each of the 4 pillars is going to block line of fire, so you're going to have to shoot around the columns inside of the mansion. It's actually a pretty cool map, and the detail on it actually looks pretty realistic. There is some hindering here and there. There's like some giant plants you can see there on the corner of the little elevated patches. So every now and then there's some spots of hindering, but for the most part it's all indoors and some different elevations and blocking. Utopia West is actually a very clever map. If you are a big fan of the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline, you'll recognize this setting as the first issue, when the Avengers show up and basically try to take hope away from the X-Men and for what's coming. The shoreline is level 1. These little green patches you see, those are hindering. Then there are areas where you can go up elevation, so you go from 1 to 2. And then that spot there is not actually 3, it actually dips down at level 1. So basically you have one side that is like you're storming the beaches, and then the other side is elevated. However, the starting areas are on left to right, so you won't have to start down in the water, but you will have the option to use it as you fight. It's actually a really cool map and a really good idea for the set. If this map looks familiar, that's because it is. This is the first map from the X-Men starter set, and it's Utopia East instead of West. So like the last one I showed you, takes place on Utopia in issue 1 of AVX. This one's only slightly different in the fact that it has like 1 or 2 more extra squares of hindering there on the shoreline, and these little pool things on top of the upper elevation, they are not actually water. There are these little silver things which are blocking, so very, very similar to the other Utopia map. The other map for the X-Men set is Utopia Indoor. It's pretty much your standard fare for an indoor map. Lots of walls, tiny little areas of hindering here and there, lots of rooms, and a couple squares of blocking down these long hallways to keep you from sniping people as they move through. So pretty boring map in my opinion. The Avengers Mansion and its side of Utopia are probably the best of the 2 map options of the packs. And the answer is 2 parts. If you are going to be participating in the AVX events, getting the other 2 pieces for your team base and receiving the team base for your starter set, then I think that it is definitely worth your money. That's just my opinion. $40 is still pretty steep, but I think with the inclusion of a team base and the poker chips, dice, and the 6 figures, which are good dials, I think it's worth the money. If you're not going to participate, if you're not going to get your team base, if you're not going to get your other 2 figures, I don't believe it is. Unless you just really, really like these figures. And these are some good figures, and like I said, some pretty decent sculpts. If you would like to see the sculpts, you can go to hcrealms.com, go to the unit section, and see for yourself the dials, and if you are interested in purchasing the starters for any of these figures in particular. I would say the chips and the dice are a welcome addition to starter sets. I don't know that they warrant a extra, $10 or $15 price tag, but they are nice, and it's a good sign. It's a good. I mean, it would be nice if Fast Forces maybe cost like $5 more, but had a set of poker chips and dice in them. If your Teen Titans Fast Forces came with poker chips and dice, even if the figures weren't that good, you may be more inclined to purchase it just for the fact that some people would purchase it just because they want the dice and the poker chips. So thank you guys for tuning in to the starter review. I hope it helps you make up your mind and save some money or spend some money well. Whatever the case may be, I'd like to welcome you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our podcast, Dial H for HeroClix, weekly on iTunes and Podbean. And we will see you guys next week.